George Russell wins the Austrian Grand Prix, but was it a dominant display? Or did the qualifying yellow flag drama hand George a shallow race win on Sunday? Nevertheless, he got the job done, and he now cements himself back into P2 in the championship, 40 points behind current leader and teammate Kimi Antonelli. But this weekend, there was a lot more to unpack, notably Ferrari. There was a lot of optimism coming into this weekend's Grand Prix on the back of Lewis Hamilton's breakout Ferrari win. They also came with an engine upgrade. Unfortunately, where did their race pace go? Very underwhelming. And Red Bull, all eyes on their upgrades. Could it bring Max back into the mix? Well, he was very competitive out in Austria, fighting for a win. And of course, Racing Bulls, another double points finish in their battle for P5 in the Constructors' Championship. You could call it the best of the rest. There's a lot to cover. This is the Austrian Grand Prix review. G'day F1 fans. I almost said this is the Australian Grand Prix review. Very easy mistake to make. But I am rolling solo today. Mick is still enjoying his European holiday, but he did assure me that he'll be back later this week for when we do our British Grand Prix race preview. Be good to have him back, no doubt. All right, straight into Mercedes. We'll get to probably the most controversial call of the weekend, which was, of course, Saturday's qualifying. But before that, it felt like business as usual. Mercedes, clearly best of the teams, FP1, FP2, dominated, especially by the young fella, Kimi Antonelli. But Saturday, this is the talking point. Max has a big, fast accident on his final push lap. Now, a lot of us would have expected double waved yellow flags, or some are even arguing it should have been a red flag. It was a part of the circuit where it could be very dangerous, very high speed, and especially in qualifying when everybody's on the limits on their final push lap. But I think this just highlights George Russell's experience. He got the decision right in the moment that counted. He saw at that point of time it was a single waves yellow, so all he needed to do was just show a little bit of a blip off the throttle, which he did, and he was very clear on the radio very quickly that he had done that. Now, he said afterwards that he was already 0.5 up on, at the time, Charles Leclerc's provisional pole, and, well, even with the blip, he was up by around 1/4 of a second. Kimi Antonelli, on the other hand, well, maybe a little bit of an experience. Wrong decision at the wrong time. Thought it was a double waved yellow flag, which means, you're going to be more aggressive in lifting off and bailing out, which he did. He did the right thing, according to that. Unfortunately, it wasn't a double waved yellow. And, well, he was potentially on form for another pole position of the year. He had to settle with P4. But before we get into that, it was a bit of deja vu for the Ferrari mechanics. We have seen them celebrate a bit too prematurely before, and this was the case. So unlucky for the Scuderia, but it is what it is. But this will inherently create more debate around some of these situations where perhaps in these more dangerous situations, we need to see a double wave yellow straight away, or, some argue, a red flag in that case. But again, hindsight. Let the debates begin regarding that. Now, let's start off with George Russell, because I am noticing a bit of not skepticism about the win. He got the job done, but more along the lines of it wasn't a statement drive. It wasn't like a world championship drive. We saw Kimi and Max, hunt him down near the end. George doesn't care what people say about it. The simple fact is he got the 25 points in his pocket. It was a result that he needed to turn around his championship. He'll take a lot of confidence out of this. I tend to think that he was more in, let's say, probably a bit more conservative at the end. Knew he had a bit of a lead, more about nursing the car home and just tying up the result rather than trying to make it look all extraordinary. Although, perhaps if there were a few more laps left on the board, it would have been interesting with Max and Kimi. I think Kimi probably would have got the job done in that sense. But hey, look, we always talk about hindsight, wonderful thing. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, whether it was a bit of a shallow win. Kimi, on the other hand, though, his race was, he was super quick all weekend. Like I said, unlucky in qualifying, but to finish P3, I think was damage limitation, because if you think about those opening few laps, he was pretty scruffy. I think he was a little over eager to try and get in front of the two Ferraris ahead of him. And, that could have ended up in tears, because there were a few times he went quite wide. And we know in Austria, particularly like turn 1, turn 3, turn 4, I think turn 1 and turn 3, you generally have those big sausage curbs on the outside. So if you hit them at the wrong angle, you could do quite a bit of damage, whether it's suspension, bit of front wing damage, but notably under the floor. So looks like he got away with that and then settled into his rhythm and then got the job done. Look, we knew it was going to be a multi-stop race, very hot conditions, very similar to Barcelona. We had around a peak of 52 degrees on track temp, and I think it was around 33-degree ambient temperature. So we knew the tyres, those Pirellis were going to put in a lot of work, and strategy was going to play quite a big theme throughout Sunday's race. They went with a two-stopper, similar strategy, starting off in the mediums, and then the final two stints on hards for both Kimi and George, although Kimi did go a little bit longer on his first stint and extended his second stint. So he had quite a tyre offset versus George at the end there. I think it was around 9-lap tyre offset. So that probably did help his pace near the end. But look, I think Toto, he walks away extremely happy. It was a clean race weekend. They didn't have any reliability issues. Big points for the constructors. And of course, huge points, especially on George Russell's side of the garage. Red Bull, home team. This is their home race in Austria. They needed a big one. There's a lot of rumours still swirling about where Max Verstappen is going to be, potentially in 2027. By the sounds of it, it looks to be more based on performance. Can Red Bull increase performance of the car and I guess entice Max to stay? And maybe they did that just this weekend. Big upgrade package did come. On Friday, things didn't look great, but that has been a bit of a theme for Red Bull over quite a while now, where just Friday, they just never seem to hook up, and then they do surprise us and bring some performance back on Saturday, which they did. Max Verstappen, look, he looked pretty quick, and there was a while there where I think some of us thought that, well, maybe a pole position is a chance, but he's had that massive off. Glad he was all okay, hopped out of the car, no problems at all. But he did suggest post-qualifying that he was probably on pace if he hooked up Sector 3, probably around P3. But it was a P5 start in the end. Isaac Hadjar, well, it was a bit of a mixed bag, really. It was P8 in the end qualifying. Definitely some struggles there for Isaac. But as far as picking up points, Max Verstappen, big charge home. He went for... Well, they both went with the two-stopper, but Max went with a very long second stint. So he started off in the medium, and then the final stints were on hards, but he did go quite long on that second hard. And perhaps maybe in hindsight went a little bit too long and started to lose a little bit of time. And the deficit to, catch up to Russell over the last probably like 12 to 15 laps, I think off the top of my head, it was around 12 or so seconds, maybe even a little bit more, but he was able to, keep chipping away at it. In the end, he was 1.6 seconds short of catching George Russell, but I think he'll be pretty buoyant. It was only his second podium of the season, which is kind of hard to believe. Isaac, look, I think a decent performance in the end. He's picked up more points, P6, so you can't really complain where Isaac is so far this season. He's doing what needs to be done, and I think he will keep growing into that second seat at Red Bull. But I guess the key question is moving forward, was this upgrade and the performance from it track specific? Let's find out. It's going to be a big one in Silverstone this coming week, and it is a completely different track. Now, on to McLaren. So McLaren, they came out on Friday. Things were looking okay pace-wise. They had their moments. Unfortunately for McLaren, there's still some reliability issues there. Lando Norris, again, being compromised in FP1. I think it was a hydraulics issue. which did, he got a little bit of running in, but not as much as he would have liked. It was a P6 qualifying for Lando, P7 for Oscar, but race-wise, Lando P7, Oscar Piastri with a pretty decent P4, which I think he was pretty happy about, finishing ahead of both Ferraris. Pit stop strategies, they did the same thing. Two-stopper seemed to be the way to go. Medium, hard for both of them. Lando did go a little bit further in his second, before coming in for that second stop. He got sort of stuck in a bit of traffic. Piastri, though, it was a strong race, and he was pretty stoked to finish P4. It's been, it's been a pretty tough season so far for Oscar. And you could say over the last few race weekends, Lando definitely has been the quicker driver of both. So I think for Oscar going forward, it was just a nice little confidence booster. And I think to get up over those Ferraris as well was a pretty decent effort. Now, on to Ferrari. Very underwhelming on Sunday, unfortunately. There was a lot of expectation on Ferrari to close the gap even further with Mercedes, more notably around the engine upgrade. Now, like a lot of people were suggesting that they were going to gain around, I think it was around 15 horsepower. Did it help? Didn't seem to be like a massive deal in the end, but they did go with a different strategy, especially on Lewis Hamilton's side. He committed to a three-stopper. He went through a range, didn't he? He started off on the mediums, went to the hards, then went to the softs, then went to the hards. He wasn't extremely happy with how the hards were performing. And it seemed to be that Ferrari also had a lot of heating problems as well. There were a few times over the radio where the engineer was telling Lewis to, change to a different mode and, keep temps in check and that type of thing. So, yeah, a bit of a scruffy race weekend really for Ferrari. In fact, I think it's one of their worst race weekends when you take together like constructors' points. So Lewis Hamilton starting P3, finishing in P5. Charles, well, this was a pretty important weekend for Charles because he's made quite a few mistakes. P2, so out-qualifying Hamilton, was the start that he needed. Unfortunately, come the race, he could only manage P8 in the end. He ended up going with a three-stopper, although I think he was pretty much committed to a two-stop. Ended up just taking a free stop at the end. They threw on the soft boots. Struggled with the rear of the car, especially on the second hard stint. He just said that it was just really hard to keep the car in the window. Look, Ferrari, they had showed some pretty good pace on Saturday. We thought they were a chance of pole for a little while there. There was a moment. The upgrades certainly worked in Barcelona, but it looks like maybe Austria just exposed them a little bit, or at least exposed the optimism for Ferrari fans because, there was a lot of euphoria around Lewis Hamilton's win out in Barcelona. But I still think Ferrari will be pretty mega come Silverstone this week, especially on Lewis Hamilton's side. Racing Bulls, double points. Now, when you're in a midfield or best of the rest, you definitely want to be capitalizing on double points. P9 and P10 finish. Liam Lawson getting the better of Arvid Lindblad. It's exactly how they qualified as well. So both getting into Q3, which is always a good sign. They were pretty quick off the bat from Friday. They definitely did look like best of the rest. 3 points may not sound like a whole lot from the constructors' battle point side of things, but Alpine came up empty-handed, and it just meant that they just ate into that deficit a little bit for P5 in the constructors' title. Look, there were some pretty big talking points regarding sort of what happened during the race. Now, early in the race, I think it was like lap 1 or lap 2, it didn't sound good on Liam Lawson's radio where he was complaining about he was on fire. Like, he could smell stuff. It wasn't good. And I thought, oh, God, this is not looking good. Maybe it's a brake issue. Luckily, it didn't curtail another great point-scoring weekend out for Liam. He's having an absolute stonker. Because let's not forget, about 48 hours beforehand, a couple of days, 2-3 days beforehand, there were reports that Solov had a guaranteed seat at VCARB. Now, if you don't know who Nicholas Solov is, he is currently battling in the F2 championship. He is the only Red Bull affiliated driver or sponsored driver in F2, and he is a very, very good talent. And when the reports came out, it sounded a bit odd because Liam is having a really great season so far. So were the rumors or the reports true? Well, Kim Illman did do a good video on it where he had approached both camps. He went to Solov's camp, asked them about it, any truth to it. Now, they flat outly just said no, there's no truth to it. In fact, they feel it's a big distraction. They're getting all types of people in Bulgaria calling up, wanting to know about the news. Clearly, it's a big thing in Bulgaria. Bulgaria hasn't had a Formula One driver before, or at least to my knowledge. And on the flip side, Kim went to Racing Bulls, Red Bull, any truth in the matter, and it seems to be like, no, they're very happy where both their drivers are in VCARB. But on the flip side, Solov did go on to win the feature race. So he is a very good young talent, but maybe the guaranteed seat does exist, but maybe it is a guaranteed reserve driver seat at this point in time, because we know Iwasa and Tsunoda probably are going to be moving on next year. Now, Lindblad, he was pretty disappointed qualifying in P10. I think he thought he had a couple more tenths in the car. Probably a little bit disappointed not to get one up over Liam. The race itself, they were both very, very close. There was a few little heated moments over the radio. Lawson felt a little bit hard done by. He was told by the team to, while he was in P9 at this point, to sort of like hold a steady pace, keep the tyres in check. And I think under those assumptions, it was that Lindblad was going to be doing the same thing as well. So there was a moment where Lindblad did pass him from a long way back and he wasn't too happy about it. Anyway, cut a long story short, double points, very happy with it. Liam, when he did come into pit lane after the race on the radio, I think it was Permain. Alan Permain came on and was just like, be cool, just basically just simmer down. We'll sort it out afterwards. So, so maybe just the first moment of a little bit of rivalry heating up amongst those two VCARB drivers. But look, I'm happy. Any point-scoring finish for Liam Lawson, for me, is something to celebrate. And I'm pretty sure if you are a Liam Lawson, or if you are from New Zealand, giving him full support, and we'd love to see that continue. Now, on to Audi. Now, I keep saying it. When I look at the Constructors' Championship and they're sitting back only on 3 points, I kind of find it hard to believe, because there had been moments throughout the season where they definitely look like they're in the mix for a top 10 result, except reliability seems to always bite them on the ass. Well, the good news is reliability wasn't an issue for them. The bad news is that, well, the qualifying wasn't too bad. Bortoletto, P12. He finished just outside the points in P11. Hulkenberg starting P14, just outside the points in P12. Where they're probably a little unlucky in this one is if you look back at the previous 7 rounds of Grand Prix action, we've probably had reliability issues of, if you're looking at the top 4 teams, there's always been reliability issues somewhere along the lines that has allowed some of these teams on the cusp of P10, so those cars sort of battling around P11, P12, being able to pick up some points. And well, as luck have it, Audi, they were on the cusp, but unfortunately no cars in front suffered any reliability issues, so they were not able to pick up any scraps. So they're still sitting back on 3, but look, wasn't too bad of an effort. Now, Alpine, they'll be disappointed because they weren't able to replicate what we saw out in Barcelona, and that was not have the greatest qualifying session, but then being able to switch on race pace and pick up points. And we thought maybe that was another opportunity in Austria. Conditions were very similar, like I mentioned, regarding the temperatures. Pierre Gasly qualifying just outside in P11, Franco Colapinto in P16, but unfortunately their race pace just didn't switch on. Bit of a difficult weekend overall. Gasly finishing P13, Franco Colapinto in P15. Gasly, one of the other drivers that went with a 3-stopper, just never really worked. Colapinto stuck with a 2-stopper. But really, they just never looked in the hunt. It just seemed to be that race pace. They could not switch it on. Colapinto did have a pretty poor start. Apparently, he had a bit of an issue with deployment, which basically he had to end up fighting further from the back. Yeah, like in these type of conditions, hot weather, you don't want to be stuck behind traffic, especially if you are a little bit quicker and having to be a bit more aggressive. Tyre deg is a massive issue. No points this weekend. And Gasly, well, he's been really good. Like, as far as best of the rest as an individual driver, he has been that guy. So unfortunately, no points for him. Haas, well, it was just another disappointing weekend, really. Ollie Behrman qualifying P13, yet again outqualifies his more experienced teammate, Esteban Ocon, who was in P15, but race pace, again, wasn't really there. Ollie finishing P14, Esteban finishing P16. Keep saying it every week. Time is running out for Esteban Ocon to prove his worth over at Haas. Rumours are starting to circulate. They will only get a lot louder and stronger as we head into the summer break. Haas are looking. They're looking externally. And we have seen that Komatsu has made it quite public that they were pretty disappointed in what Esteban produced last year. So unfortunately for Esteban, if you can't turn it around, because I don't think he has a parachute seat. I don't think there's anywhere else he could really go if he is demoted from Haas. Speaking of someone who needs a massive improvement, a team, and, well, it's very similar to Haas in a way with the inter-team battle. There's a lot of pressure building up here. Williams, they need weight reduction. They need some serious upgrades very soon. Albon did say, I think post-race, that they expect a few minor upgrades to come for this week's Grand Prix in Silverstone. They need it. They massively need it. If they want to keep their talent, they need to make sure that they can show that they can head in the right direction. Quite frankly, Williams has been a massive disappointment. Both knocked out in Q1. Carlos, P17, got the better of Albon again by some margin as well, to be clear. So Alex starting P18. Carlos, unfortunately, having the issue, having to stop near the start-finish line. And again, a little bit of conjecture regarding how long it took to bring out the VSC in that particular circumstance. That could have changed the race for a few people, most notably, I think Kimi Antonelli may have been able to take advantage of that cheaper pit stop, but that was not to be. Carlos was, I think, one of the other drivers that went with the soft to start, but yeah, again, didn't really make any difference. Albon, two-stopper, medium, hard, but look, there's just no pace in that car. And also, on the note of Carlos Sainz, it seems to be a suspected PU electrical issue. Mercedes in the back, they've definitely been having some problems over there. Realistically, Williams are in a massive tough patch, and they need to turn it around really quick if they want to hold on to their talent. Most notably, though, Carlos Sainz, I think he is probably more in demand than Alex at this point in time. Aston Martin, they were out-qualified by their back-marker battlers Cadillac, but Fernando starting in P21, finishing the race in P18, and Sir Lancelot, P22 start. Unfortunately, with a DNF in the end, had an issue, retired with a suspected ERS issue after 45 laps. Look, the team is still in data gathering mode. It's purely get the laps on the board. We're all waiting for this big upgrade that is supposedly coming in Belgium, and it will probably also determine the fate of whether Fernando Alonso sticks around for another season as well. I don't expect them to miraculously get them back on pace with the midfield, but they definitely need to show, especially after a lot of this investment that they put into that team, that they're heading into the right track into 2027. And of course, Cadillac. Now, Cadillac was interesting because they were one of the other teams that bought massive upgrades. And boy, FP1, Valtteri Bottas, he did look quite competitive if you sort of just purely taking the times that he was able to post in relation to some of the other midfield competitors. Again, yes, I know it's FP1. You don't want to get too excited about what the times are there, but it kind of looked positive. It really did. But unfortunately, just from that point forward, FP2, FP3, qualifying, etc., just all went downhill. Pure, just a whole lot of reliability issues. Look, we give them leeway because they are a new team. They can kind of get away with this. But yeah, I think they'll be disappointed because they wouldn't be able to gather enough data on all their upgrades just due to the reliability issues. And if we come to the race, I mean, look, they both basically, I think they both retired with the same issue, which was the brakes again. We saw that, we've seen the brake issues a couple of times. In fact, it almost scuppered their qualifying in Barcelona because they had to prove that they got on top of those brake issues when I think it was Valtteri had the big FP3 off due to brake failure. Maybe they thought they got on top of them, but it was hot conditions again, and it was at the start of the race when the car is super heavy and surrounded by more hot exhaust with the cars being closer, that type of thing. Clearly, there is a lot of work to do. Let's hope they can get on top of it. Well, there you have it. Austrian Grand Prix, team to team, wrapped up. It was a pretty decent race overall. Plenty going on, but of course, it wouldn't be a Grand Prix without a bit of controversy. And of course, people debating about certain things. The FIA, they did what they did because they wanted a British driver on pole and yada, yada, and all this type of stuff. But anyway, let those people keep battling it out about that. We will move on. Now, if you made it this far and you do like the content, well, look, we're still pushing for 1,000 subs by the end of the season. And yeah, if you like the video, give it a big thumbs up. Of course, it does help us out a lot. We've greatly appreciated of it. Going into our predictions. Now, I know Mick is not here, but I will let him know that I got an extra 2 points on him this week. I predicted the pole sitter and the winner, which was, of course, George Russell. So I'm now winning that all-important prediction championship over Mick. 7 points to, I was about to say 3, 4. Can't shortchange him. He will go back and no doubt make sure I got the right results. And of course, with Mick not being here, I can't give him the final thoughts. So I guess I'm going to give it a crack. Was it a shallow win for George Russell? Did he get lucky with the yellow flag drama? Well, I don't think he got lucky. I think he picked his moment well, showed his experience. He didn't have to win the race by 20 or 30 seconds and show utter dominance. He just needed to get the job done, and he did that. I'd love to know what you all think at home. Ferrari, we got to go there. Now, there was a lot of euphoria around Lewis Hamilton's win, and this does sort of meld into a question that we sort of did propose in the preview, especially if you look at the thumbnail of the preview. It's like, who was number one? So we had a lot of people after Hamilton's win suggest Ferrari needs to back Lewis Hamilton 100% from this point on for a title tilt. Do you think that is still the case? Yes, Lewis got, a better result than Charles. You could argue Charles got a better result in qualifying. Qualifying doesn't matter. It's where you pick up the points, of course. And even on the flip side with the Mercedes boys, Russell did what he needed to do, got the win over Kimi. Kimi's still going to be really tough to beat, but to sort of like back a one horse after 8 rounds of a 22-round Formula One World Championship, I think is a little bit premature, but I'd love to know what you think. And I'm going to throw one out there. Liam Lawson. The rumors regarding Solov. People out there, at this stage, do you think Liam Lawson has done enough to cement his seat at VCARB? I hear a lot of discussion about it, that he should move on because it is the junior team. Where does he go? Will he ever get a promotion back in Red Bull? A lot of people are saying that is highly unlikely due to the 2-race stint last year. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Drop in the comments. I always try and respond to everybody when possible, even if they are comments that, where you roast us or say something negative. That's all good. We love it all. And on that note, I'm going to leave it there. We'll catch you on the next one for the British Grand Prix preview. Mick should be back. Catch you then.